Welcome everyone to this introduction to JOSM webinar, JOSM for beginners. Sorry, we a little bit late, but we can now proceed. So just to go through a little bit of the schedule. So we're having Michael, Ralph, and me. Geoffrey, we're going to be taking you through the webinar, and I think each speaker can introduce themselves. So I think I can start with you, Michael.
On me. Shall I start?
Yes, sure, Michael. You can start and go on.
Okay. So first of all, welcome. My name is Michael Heismeyer from the Humanitarian OpenStreetMap Team. I'm currently the chairperson of the training working group. And in this first part of that webinar, I will just tell you how to get started, what you need to do in order to install JOSM, and what the user interface looks like, and how to adjust settings so that you can easily work with that. Later on, we will tell you something about the basic editing techniques. And so first of all, JOSM, this is an acronym and it stands for Java OpenStreetMap Editor. So that means in order to have a running installation of JOSM, you need a running installation of Java. And a good starting point for that is the download page here at josm.openstreetmap.de. In their wiki, this web page explains everything you need to know. So how to get Java, what you do need is a Java runtime environment. You don't have to deal with the Java source development kit or with the browser plugin. JOSM is a standalone application, so if you're a Windows user, then you can further down here find some information on where to find the download page in order to install the Java runtime environment. If you're on Linux, you should find one in your distribution's package manager. And once you've successfully installed Java, then you can go to the top here of this page and install the latest tested version. So the recommended download here would be josm-tested.jar. And if everything in this installation worked perfectly and you put this jar somewhere on your file system, you simply need to double-click that, and then you end up with something like this. This is a fairly pristine installation of Java. The only thing which might look different for you is the language comes up in the default language of your operating system. That was the only thing I tweaked before the session, so that you can see the familiar English interface and not worry about what all those German expressions might be. So on the menu, or, well, let me do it like this so that we can see something, just not interfere with the zoom menu here on my top. Okay, in the menu, there is the menu entry edit, and then you can go down to preferences, or the keyboard shortcut would be F12. That is the very first thing one should do, because there are a couple of general things we need to adjust. Very first thing is, please enable expert mode using this checkbox down there. This will bring up a couple of settings more and will make also some other menu items available. Then the next thing is, if you see this in your local language and you would prefer to use the English version in order to get all the common symbology and all the familiar terms, just go into Look and Feel. This is the rightmost tab here. And down in this menu, you can select among all the different languages available for JOSM. The next thing we need to do is we need to connect this JOSM with the OpenStreetMap account. That means in this list of icons on the left, The second part here is connection settings for the server, and the recommended way how to proceed is to use OAuth and not this basic authentication. Then you simply click on Authorize Now, provide your OSM username, provide your password, and click on Authorize Now, and then it gets a token, and you can simply accept it, and that's all you need to do in here. That means that you don't need to store any credentials here in the preferences file of JOSM. Then you can see an icon which looks like a TV remote control, and indeed it is a remote control. And if you work particularly in a humanitarian context, you will frequently work with a tasking manager, and that is the way how to set up the connection between the tasking manager and JOSM. You simply need to activate those two checkboxes, enable remote control, and also enable HTTPS support. You don't have to worry about any of those other options. The defaults are fine for working in this way. And the last thing we really need to do before having a closer look at the interface is we need a few plugins. The fourth icon from the top here, which looks like an electric plug, takes you to the plugin tab. And at the very first thing here, you won't see anything. Then here on the leftmost button at the bottom, download list, loads the currently available list of plugins, and the minimum recommended set of plugins which we need is just 2. They are arranged here alphabetically. The first one is the Buildings Tools plugin, because in this webinar we will get back to its functionality later on, so just check the box. And another plugin is the Utilities plugin. This has some frequently needed features. So that's the Utils plugin too, which can be found here at the bottom. And then you simply choose the Update Plugins button in here. And then it loads and installs those 2 plugins. And yeah, just say OK. Say OK in here. Exactly. Okay, the security warning. Okay. Let's see. We got that. I'll try and restart this. It's a bit weird. Okay, so I got the Buildings Tool plugin. Okay, no matter what went wrong here exactly, but so let us get an overview of a user interface. The user interface, the complete user interface, as you can see it in here, appears whenever you downloaded some data, or is it just used here for demonstration purposes, just File, New, Layer. There are basically 3 important parts. There is a set of icons on the left, you've got some panels on the right, and you've got the familiar menu at the top. I won't go through any of these, through all of these in detail, but a few of these items here deserve to be mentioned. The icons, the top group of icons on the left, it basically determines which mode you're working in. When you start here freshly, you are in the selection mode, where you can select items and you can move them and modify them. So there is a keyboard shortcut S, and you will frequently use that one, because whenever one edited something, it is recommended to get back to select mode in order not to accidentally draw some lines or points. Then this one here is draw nodes with the keyboard shortcut add. This is what we need in order to add some points or lines. There are also a few other selection modes and modification modes, and we'll get back to that when we will talk about editing. The panels on the right typically provide some information and enable you to edit some of the properties of the objects you will be drawing. And what you will use less frequently is the relations panel. I'll just close it for now. This list of panels which we see here, these are the three most important panels. Topmost one is layers. Layers is anything where you can draw. Layers are, for instance, imagery layers, and we'll get back to the topic of layers soon. Then, as far as objects are concerned, if you select one object, then its tags, its properties will be visible here, and you can also modify that list. And down there, the third panel shows up all the selected elements. And if you accidentally, for instance, close the layers panel and say, oh, that's something I really need, the group here at the top on the left icon, here at the bottom of these left icons, these are the icons in order to open and close all those panels. So just click here on the layers icon and the layers panel reappears. Another strategy would be to go to the menu here, and Windows also provides you a list of available panels. You can see that there are quite a few others, but these three here, layers, tags, and selections, are the ones you will most commonly work with. There are a few buttons here. I personally don't work with them that much. They are basically, these are items from the menu, and it is possible to change the setting here in order to get some of the more frequently used menu items here available as buttons. What you will do is, further on, you will download some data, and in editing, you can, of course, you have copy and paste operations as usual. Yes, in the file menu, I just wanted to say, well, we have, of course, also the upload data once you've finished editing. And very importantly, we've got presets, which means when we draw a point or a line, it just doesn't mean anything at all. It's just a point with geographical coordinates, or a line is a collection of points with coordinates. They don't have a special meaning. We assign meanings to them with tags, and to this end there is a preset, which means if I just add a point here, now I've got one node, I've got no tags at all, and then I could, for instance, say, well, I know that at this place where I put this point, for instance, there is a school. This would be an educational facility, and then I could assign it school to it. I could say apply preset, and then amenity school would be the relevant tag. Among those presets, the ones you will most frequently work with, of course, are the highways, streets, where you can assign the different kinds of streets from motorway or primary down to residential road, and or water if you prefer to draw rivers and streams. And then there will also be the geography category, because geography contains places such as villages, towns, and also nature if you determine if you want to draw some wood, or land use, for instance. Land use covers residential areas, but also commercial or industrial areas. These are probably the tags you will most frequently be working with. And well, that is, I mean, what we can add here for the basic installation of JOSM, and this is also a pretty quick overview of the UI. There's one interesting feature I'd like to mention. We have some information here down in the bottom line, and also we have the latitude and longitude coordinates, and once you click on that, you get a window which can also where you can also copy a URL. And this is quite useful if, for instance, you need some help and request some help on the mailing list or through some forum or wherever, a Slack channel. Just paste this link and people know where your problem is located. And yes, with this quick overview, I think I would like to hand the microphone over back to Geoffrey, who will tell you a little bit more about the layers in this panel here on the top right. And when we will start talking about editing, I'll be back with you.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. So we have a quick session of Q&A. For those of you who have questions, Michael, there is a question here on the chat. Francis is trying to download JOSM, but keeps on getting an error message that network errors occurred, which may be due to a missing proxy configuration. And he's asking if you have any ideas how this error can be fixed.
Well, I just freshly downloaded JOSM for this webinar here this morning, and there the server was working without any problems.
Yeah, thank you. If anyone has any question, please feel free to put them in the chat window, and we will read them out and get answers. But also at the end of the webinar, we shall also have a session where we can unmute everyone and have people ask questions. So, yeah, we're going to jump into the next session, where I'm going to take you through layers and a little bit of the tasking manager. Yeah, Michael, can you see my screen?
Yes, I see your JOSM.
Thank you. So I'm just going to take us through a quick walkthrough of how we can map using JOSM, but also connected to the hot tasking manager. So one thing that Michael mentioned, which is very important in preferences, if you're going to map from the tasking manager, is to make sure your remote control is enabled, because this will enable the tasking manager to communicate with your JOSM. So if this is checked and click OK, then everything should be fine. And next, you want to make sure your JOSM is already loaded when you go to the tasking manager. And then, so the tasking manager is tasks.hotosm.org. So when it's loaded, then I can go to start mapping. And what this one will give me is a list of available tasks to work on, where I can choose to map from any part of the world. It's important to check, like, what's the percentage of the mapping on each task. For example, Kerala floods India is at 97% mapped and 33% validated. So I will not go for such a task. I'll just choose one. So have Mountain Elgon landslide risk, which is at 37% mapped and 9% validated. So I'll just use that as an example for this session. So basically, what I will do is to, of course, read the instructions. One thing to note is the imagery that you're going to use, which is Bing in this case. So So when you're ready to get started, that's after reading through the instructions and the description of the task to know what type of mapping is required. Can go on and say start mapping. So one thing to note is that you have to log in to the tasking manager using your OSM account. So I'm logging in with my OSM username, and I have to grant access to the tasking manager to access my account details. And now I can go on and select map. It will pick a task for me to map. So for this case, I'm having a square from Bale. So you can either select the task at random, or you can just select it manually. The other thing to choose is which editor you want to use. So there are different options: ID editor, JOSM, Potlash, field papers. I'll select JOSM, and then start editor. Meanwhile, I'm making sure that my JOSM is running already. So if I start editor, what this is going to do is to open the OSM data in JOSM. So it happens automatically as long as your remote control is enabled. And one quick thing to note is that OSM data is already added as a layer that is in the layers panel on the upper right corner. To be able to do the mapping, you need to add different layers to help you. And you need imagery. So the task was saying use being aerial imagery. So sometimes the imagery loads automatically, but if it doesn't, then you have to select it manually. So I'll load being aerial imagery from my list. And now I can see the imagery layer, and now I can now go on and start editing and making changes to the map. But I just want to focus on the layers, that everything that is added as a layer. So from my layers panel, I can see a green icon which is having a tick. That one indicates what my active layer is. So that means OSM data layer is active, and I can be able to edit it. If I want, I can deactivate it. So I've just double clicked on being aerial imagery. And now what is happening is that the OSM data layer is in the background, but I can't make any edits to it. And if you check on my editing tools on the left-hand side, they are grayed out because it's not active, so I can't make any changes to it. I have to double click the same layer and be able to activate. So now my icons are active and I can make edits. The other thing to note is that you can also change the order of these layers using these buttons here. So for example, I can move the OSM layer to be below the imagery layer, but I don't want to do that because then I'll not be able to see the existing data. So it's always important to make sure that the OSM data layer is on top of the other layers. The other thing that is important to note is you can change the visibility of a selected layer. For example, I've just selected being aerial imagery here, and I can change the opacity, the colorfulness, the gamma, and the sharpness of the layer. So for example, I've just changed the opacity. I can increase the colorfulness, So tweaking your imagery makes it more visible and allows you to map better. Especially you may load an imagery which is like very bright and features are not clear and you need to adjust. And you can always add other layers. So I can even add another set of imagery, which I can compare with the other imagery just to know which one is the best imagery to use in a certain instance. And what I want to note here is that there is this icon on the layers, and what that allows you to do is to hide and unhide a layer. So it's already part of my data, but I can hide or unhide it. So this is useful because sometimes data is covering certain features and you want to see what is below the features. So hiding and unhiding helps you to see things more clearly. And when you put the data back, then you can go on with editing and adding more features. The last thing I want to talk about is the delete button, which is also in the layers window. So what that one allows you to do is to delete a layer from your open project in JOSM. So for example, I can delete Esri world imagery. So what that does is to remove this layer from my window. I can also do the same for being aerial imagery, and now you can see that I'm remaining with only the data that is visible. Yeah, and I can also even delete the OSM data layer, and it will just show me back my JOSM as from the beginning. So that's it about layers, and I can now hand over back to Michael to take us back through the rest of the items on the agenda.
Yes. Okay. Just a moment.
So Ruth is asking if it is okay to record the webinar. So just to point out that we are doing recording of the webinar. So the recorded version will be shared with everyone who attended after the webinar. So Ruth, that is catered for.
So.
And then there was another question about whether it is possible to change the resolution of the imagery. Yeah, unfortunately, that's not possible. You can only change the opacity and the colorfulness, but you can't really do anything about the resolution. So keep the questions coming, and yeah, over to you, Michael.
Okay. So you can hear me now, I hope. And I hope you can also see my JOSM.
Yes, we can hear you and we can see your JOSM.
Okay, perfect. So this is an area downloaded here, and it will tell you a little bit about some basic editing techniques, basically adding points, lines, and shapes, and how to turn that into real objects. And after that, Ralph will present a few more advanced techniques in this subject. So the most basic object, of course, is the point. I already mentioned that before. A bare point just as geographical coordinates and nothing more. So, so let us assume we know that this here is a village or a hamlet, and we would like to designate that. Then the point we have to do is, by default, as I told you, we're in the selection mode. We have to get into add points mode, which is the third icon here from the top, or simply hit shortcut A. You will be using shortcuts pretty often, I can promise you. And some of the most important bits to understand is, well, if you edited something and you want to do something else, what I do is I always, first of all, hit S in order to get back to selection mode, and then I hit escape because it deselects anything which might be selected. So that is a good starting point for navigating around in order to minimize the risk to damage some of the existing data. So now let's hit A or use this icon over there. We're now in add points mode, and if you just want to add a single point, you can make a double click at the desired position. Well, there you can see it's highlighted in red, and our selection tells us we just have a node, and the properties here for the node are empty because the geographical coordinates are never displayed in here, and just don't know anything about it. So let's assume we know that this is some kind of a hamlet. Then, as I told you previously, we need the presets menu, and in this case we move down to geography, and in geography we find the subcategory of places. Oops, there we go. And then we could designate it as a hamlet. I've frequently seen mapping where people try to fill in all these data fields which are available in these preset forms. Please don't do that. We do remote mapping, so typically when we add a place, we can only judge, is it a hamlet, is it a village, or is it a city? We ourselves here don't know the name of this place. Pretty much the same goes for any buildings. We can see that it's a building, but we don't typically know what the building is used for. And we also don't know about street names, so don't guess wildly. You don't have to edit anything in those fields if you don't want to. Just can apply the preset. And now we know, well, here we have a hamlet. So only fill in all the fields which you know, where you know the contents for sure. And please don't misuse the name field for any comments. Name is always the given name of our object as it can be seen on any sign on the ground. So don't try to call this an unnamed village or whatever. That is also something we can frequently see in the data. If you really want to make some annotation for a future mapper, you go here to add, and you can add, for instance, a note. And then you can add some text, for instance, please find out the name or whatever it would be. And that would be some information the future mapper would see when he visits this node here. Pretty straightforward as well as if you want to add lines such as roads. If we want to map this road here, which extends from that road here to the west, again, we make sure that we are in add nodes mode, hit escape so that we don't get any unintended connection with previously mapped items. And then we start here at this point, do a single click, and then just by moving our mouse and just clicking at intermediate points, we can follow this highway here as long as we want. And with a double click, we end the sequence. And then we've got a line, basically an ordered sequence of points. And again, we need the presets menu. In this case, it would be a highway, it would be a street, and in this environment, I would most probably call it an unclassified street. And again, I won't fill any of these fields here because I cannot determine any of the access restrictions. I don't know whether it's one way or not. I don't know any name. I just apply the preset and hitting escape so that it's no longer selected. And now we've got this unclassified highway. That brings me to another important point, just to recapitulate that. If you want to move around here, you can use your mouse wheel to zoom in and out. And with the right mouse button, you can move here the scenery. Don't use the left mouse button. This is used for drawing and for moving objects and for manipulating things. Use the right mouse button in order to move the scenery and the mouse wheel to zoom in. You could also use this little control here on the top left corner, but of course the mouse wheel is way more convenient. When we talk about presets, then we can talk a bit more about tags. There is one definitive reference about tags, and that is, oops, that was not what I intended, and that is the OpenStreetMap wiki. wiki.openstreetmap.org/wiki/map features is a very long list, and it contains basically all of the commonly used entries. So for instance, here we are with highways. Starts with the different classes of highways, from motorway down to residential, unclassified, or if you're not exactly sure, what about the different sorts of health facilities, you can simply look for health, and you see, oh yeah, there we are with healthcare, and then you can see, well, things are, what is a clinic, what should be designated a hospital, what would be rather a social facility. There are some explanations given, a few images to help you figure out the correct tagging category. So this web page is considered the definitive resource about everything you should apply. There is one point we'd like to point out when we are mapping in humanitarian context. Most of these, particularly the road classification scheme, are from the viewpoint of highly industrialized countries, and not that much applicable to the countries where we usually do humanitarian mapping. And that is why some members of the Humanitarian OpenStreetMap team put together a separate guide here. That's Highway Tag Africa. It's not only applicable to Africa, but certainly in many other parts in South America or Asia as well, which is a bit more adapted to these circumstances there, because typically the main wiki will tell you that any of these highways are by default well paved down to residential and service, which is most certainly not applicable to many African countries, where you can be lucky if anything except trunk and primary roads will be really paved, particularly in rural areas. So when you work in humanitarian contexts, typically have a look at this page, Highway Tag Africa. But of course, when you're mapping from the tasking manager, the definitive source, the first definitive resource to look at would be the instructions for that project you're working on, and hopefully the project manager put up a reasonable set of tags to use. And any further reference should be these two wiki pages I've just shown you. And so we try to complete this tagging scheme and these forms as much as we can, but don't guess wildly, only enter the bits which you know. And just don't abuse any tags in order to transfer any information. As I mentioned, don't call anything a name if it's not really the given name of an object. As far as lines are concerned, lines can be open. These are the lines which we just saw when it came to mapping a road. But here, this one here looks, just let me extend the downloaded area a bit. This here looks like a commercial area. So then you start mapping pretty much in the same way as we did previously. And now you close the area simply by selecting here the first layer again. Then let's go to the presets menu. And in this case, it would be land use, and then we can find out land use commercial. Well, nothing has been selected exactly. So let me select this and try again. And then it should go back. And now it's a commercial area. If it says that the object is unsuitable for assigning this preset, this does most frequently mean that you missed the first point a little bit when you hit the last point. And because area-like presets can, of course, only be assigned to areas. So that means, let me just delete this again to show you, because that is something which you can do pretty frequently. From that perspective, you don't see a big difference, but now if you want to annotate you as a commercial area, it says the preset cannot be applied since the selection is unsuitable. So if you see this, most probably you need a closed area and your area is not closed. In this way, of course, you can also draw buildings, but there is a much more intelligent way to draw most of the buildings, and that is something Ralph will be going to explain to you shortly. I think as far as basic editing is concerned, that should do it, first of all. And with these remarks, I would like to hand the microphone back.
Yes, thank you, Michael. Just looking at the chat, no question for you now, but yeah, if anyone has any question, please don't hesitate to put it in the chat. So the next session we are going to go in is about basic editing, part 2. So looking at shapes and also the built-in validator. So, and then this I'll hand over to Ralph to take us through. Ralph?
So Ralph, we cannot hear you. Did you unmute yourself?
Yeah, but we can see your screen. We don't have your audio.
Right, can you hear me now?
Now you're back, yes, thank you.
Okay, I'm busy sort of trial running a new computer, so things are not quite working as they should be. But I'll keep trying and see whether I can keep you going. Right, if everybody could do a screenshot of the keyboard shortcuts, they will come in very useful for you later on. I'm leaving that there for a few moments for you to get that. Okay. I'm now going to can you now see my JOSM editor?
Yes, we can see your JOSM editor.
Great. Okay. I've set up a few saved screens that I'm going to use to actually indicate what we're doing. So I'm going to, this is not your normal way of getting in through the tasking manager, but I've set up a few screens that I can use. So let's go in first of all, and I'm going to show you the building tool. These have all been done with the building tool, which is this over here, which you downloaded earlier on from your plugins. Using the building tool, you will also see alongside at the building tool, it has the letter B for building. Just by pressing the B, if you look at my cursor, it changes. That gives you the building tool. Now my building tool is set for rectangles, right? Interesting, if you go up here to data and have a look at the data, you can set your building shape by using Alt-R or Alt-Z or just clicking here. I've set my building shape to rectangle. Okay, if I set it to, there we go, if I set it to circle, you'll see that the cursor changes and has a little bullet rounded nose. Okay, going back, I'm going to press Alt-R. Okay, and you can see I'm back to my building tool. The building tool, as you were shown, is very basic. All you need to do is click on one corner, click on another corner, drag it out, and you have your building shape. That is your basic building shape, right? And you can just quite easily do building after building. Now, an interesting point about using the building shape, I'm going to use the S key on my computer to change my cursor to select. I select the building, and you'll see it automatically comes up as building yes, as the very basic building shape that we need. Using the building tool, you could go to presets and change that to any building that you know it is, like an apartment or a hospital or something like that. Right, so those have all been done as just plain basic buildings. Now, let's take a look at if you want to do a more complex building. Change to the building tool, pressing the shortcut key B. I can do the basic outline there, and I use the X key, extrude, to drag aside to the length I want it. I can then double click and extend or extrude the building from any point that I want to. So that gives you the shape of extending the building. Now, the joy of extending like this is if this was selected and it was building yes, it will remain building yes. If it was building apartment, all of this would remain as building apartment. The other way of doing this is using your building tool and I'm going to give you another shape. All right, not one nearby, but I'll do one here, right? If you are doing an L-shaped building and select, and that is going to be, I'm going to edit that to say it is an apartment. Okay, so now I've changed that to apartment. Now, if I use my building tool again, press B, and I make the L shape, right? I can select that one and the original one, and it tells me there are two different, because the building tool has created this one as building yes, and I have created that one as building apartment. So you are trying to join two different buildings together. So the extrude key helps you to avoid this conflict. I now press Shift J. You're about to combine two objects, but the following tags are used conflicting, yes, and apartments. So I want to change that, and I have to select either apartments, yes, or none. I'm going to choose apartments and apply that. Now the whole building is apartments. I'm going to delete that, and I'll show you the extrude tool, which is a lot quicker. Right. Press B for building. Do the basic shape. Press X to extrude. Add that and drag. Now, let me go back and change that, edit that. Sorry, that's on my other screen. Let's show you what I'm doing here. When I press edit, this little screen comes up, and I can change the key or the value. I'm going to change the value. I can either type in apartment that I want, or I can use the drop-down menu and choose apartments. Okay. Now, if I use the extrude key and just drag that out, it remains apartments, because all I'm doing is extending the existing building. So it has remained as apartments, and there is no conflict. So that's a quicker, easier way of ending up without any conflicts. It's also an easy way of creating unusual shaped buildings. Right, let's get rid of that. And I'm now going to show you what happens when you have a building that has a hole in the middle. Right. The one way of doing this is to build up your building using the building tool, and right, and build this up. Select so that they're all at the correct angle. Now I press the S key again and hold down the Shift key, and I select all the components, and I press Shift J to join them all together. Now that automatically creates a multi-polygon. Okay, that multi-polygon now has an outer row and an inner row. So you can see there's a hole in the middle now that you can see right through. To be able to move a polygon or a multi-polygon, you have to select all its components to be able to shift or move it to a new position. If you only select one component, only the one component would move, and that messes up the polygon completely. So please be careful when you are moving anything that is marked polygon. You see here it will come up saying multi-polygon. Now, multi-polygon is not just used for buildings like this. I'm going to go to a different one. Let's get rid of that. And I'm going to go to a different one that I saved. Right. Here's one that I started earlier. This is a river, but it's quite a wide river. You can see that the center line is already added the same way as you would add a road, and you look for the direction of flow. Now this line is the one that will carry the information of the river. It will carry the river name. It will carry the direction of flow. It will carry any other information like hazards along the way or anything. But to show the extent of the river, what we do is we do an outline of the river itself. So I will choose my line tool and I will quickly show, come on. Oh, just remember, when you are doing something like this, the trees will overlap the riverbank. So don't follow the line of the trees, okay? Just try to estimate where the riverbank is underneath the trees, okay? So don't follow the shape of the trees. Now, I've got this going. I'll press my S key, select, and I want to add. Okay, and when I want to add something, I get this little window coming up. I can put in there that this is a waterway and it is a riverbank. Okay, now that automatically then fills in with a blue fill. That's doing the river and the riverbank. Now, when you have an island in the riverbank, the riverbank is this one over here and that one over there. So I'm going to put in the riverbank around this area. Now, the reason I stopped that off is because I don't, you saw earlier what happens when you start moving a polygon without selecting all its points, a multi-polygon without selecting all its components. You mess it up because you leave some behind. So I don't want this whole river to be a multi-polygon. I will only make a multi-polygon of this little section where the islands are. So I'm going to go press A for my drawing tool. Here I am adding the riverbank. Come on. My mouse doesn't seem to be working properly. Escape. Let's just try and get this. There we go. Right. Now, here's a neat little trick. Using my select tool, if I select the item that I want the with the correct tags that I want, this is useful if you have 8 or 10 or 2 or 3 tags that you want to carry over, like with a road, you've got it unclassified, surface is unpaved, the source is Bing. You want to carry all those tags over. Select that line, then select the new line and press Shift R, and automatically the tagging from that one will be transferred over to the tagging of the new one. Okay, now you see this is a solid blue all round. I need the island to come out of that. So I press my A key again to draw the island, and there I'm drawing the shape of the island. Right. Now, this should not be said as a riverbank because the riverbank is that one out there. This is an inset inside the river, so it would not be labeled river. It would not be labeled riverbank. What we need to do is to tag that as an island, and that, once again, select and add, and that will be a place. So it's going to be a place, and that place will be islet, because it's not an island. Britain is an island. Ireland is an island. This is just a little islet in the middle of a river, so you would not label that as an island as such. It would be islet. Okay? Okay, and there we have it. You would use the similar sort of thing with your presets, but I'm just showing you this. Now, to be able to create this as a multi-polygon, what I do is I've got the islet selected, I press Shift, and I press the riverbank as well, the outer and the inner. I then go to my tools and create multi-polygon, or Control B. Press that, and this place islet, the riverbank is the multi-polygon outer, and the place islet is the multi-polygon inner. Now please, you can put the name of the island onto the island, but do not put the name of the river on the riverbank. The name of the river will go on the center line of the river. Okay, please remember that. Now, what happens if you want to add an extra island? All right, let's try that. Pressing A, I draw right. Select, I want it to be an place islet. Okay, so I go here. Now, we've got this already here, so all I really need to press is OK. Right, I've now got a place islet, but at the present moment, that is not a part of the multi-polygon. What I do is I select that, hold down Shift and select the multi-polygon, go to my tools, and it gives you the option to update the multi-polygon, or Control Shift B. Press that, and the island now becomes a part of that multi-polygon inner. So it's not difficult to add to a multi-polygon. Don't be afraid of it. If you want to adjust the outline, the riverbank here, select a node that already exists and move that. Select a node that already exists. If you want to, you can select a new node by taking that center point and moving that, but go to Tools, and you'll see you don't have to update the multi-polygon, right? That extra node will automatically be added to the outer. Okay, so don't be scared. It's only if you start moving things that you leave other components behind. Now, if you take a look here, it does come up with a warning that you're moving a large element. And do you really want to do that, or undo the move? Okay, it will warn you. Right. Now I'm going to move on, and let's try and do right.
Ralph, there's two questions here, maybe which you want to answer quickly.
Okay.
One is from Janine, who is asking, can you show how to do a donut-shaped building too? And other question is from
sorry to interrupt you, Jeffrey. I just talked to her, and that was well answered by that waterway multi-polygon, because it's basically just the same. How to compose multi-polygons of arbitrary shapes.
Thank you. And then the other question is from Charlotte, who is asking, how do you manage the boundary between the two riverbanks? Do they share a line and nodes to avoid a sliver?
Right. I'm not quite sure I understand the question. Are you talking about when I drew it across like that? Who asked the question?
That was Charlotte. Yeah, Charlotte, you are unmuted. If you want to ask the question, please go on.
Yes, thank you, Ralph. You explained that you were making small riverbank polygons so that you could make a multi-part polygon and not risk moving parts of it. But I just wondered if you manage the two riverbanks that you put end to end, that they're actually sharing nodes, or?
Yes, I'll show you that now. What I did was I created the one. Okay, that's one. And then when I created the next one, I shared nodes. Okay.
Okay, so do you have a snapping environment set up to make sure they actually join?
It does. If you actually click on the node, it will automatically snap to that node. It's not an automatic thing. But if you watch again, if you're zoomed in at an appreciable size, if you see that the actual node highlights when you get there, and you click on that. If you're not near the node, it doesn't highlight. But as soon as you go to the node, you see there's a little red button with an arrow next to your cursor. Do you see that? That indicates
yes,
that you're on that node. Click again, and you'll see now that that node there is larger than this node here, which means that it has joined. So all you need is, if your cursor gets close to another node, that little arrow with the red spot jumps up, and you would know that you're going to be clicking on that. So it's an indicator whether you're off the node or whether you're on the node. Can you see? If I'm off the node, and the cursor changes when I'm on the node. And that closes automatically. And you have a closed polygon. Okay? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, the answer is yes.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Okay. Right. Now, JOSM comes with a very nifty, handy item, and that is this blue arrow on the right-hand side. By clicking on the blue arrow on the right-hand side, you open up a new panel called Validation Results. Now, I haven't selected anything inside this box. I have downloaded that, and before I click on any item, I run a validation. That validation will highlight any errors and problems that exist. Right, it's running the validation. And it's looking through, and it tells me here that I have one major error and 56 warnings. Okay, this validation will spot things that you don't spot. So you can zoom in and think, oh, this looks great. But you can see now that by running the validator, I actually come up with a new layer, validator errors, and these will be highlighted in yellow. But what I can do is click on the little plus sign next to the errors or next to the warnings, and it will list all the problems that I am finding. So your validator will tell you building inside building, which is also your error. By clicking on the arrow there, it tells you 2 nodes. You click on that and right click on that and then zoom to the problem, and it brings you to, you can clearly see there's a building inside the building. Select the building that shouldn't be there and delete it. Okay, that clears up that problem. Going along, that will solve that one, but crossing buildings and highway, there's 40 of those. This is a no-no. It doesn't help to have this because it messes around quite a lot. So you've got the building going across the road. Now you can see what's happened here. What has happened is that they've had an instruction to draw the buildings, but what they did not do when they first opened up the square to start is to check the imagery against the existing drawn items like the roads. They should in actual fact have moved the imagery to be able to line up. That would be going to imagery and getting a new offset, or if you've downloaded the offset tool, you can click on adjust imagery and it comes up with a window which says you can use that. Now I only have one set of imagery open, so it tells me I can move that, and if I grab the imagery I can move it until the roads are in position. Then only should I start drawing my buildings. So please remember, check your imagery alignment before you start drawing anything. Okay? Now I can okay that, but I've now got to check these buildings as they were and not as I've now got them. So what I need to do is go to my Bing aerial imagery here, and it's got this icon next to it which says I have an offset. If I click on that, the whole thing jumps back to where it was originally and there's no longer the offset. This building should not be on the road, or should I say the road should not be on the building. Okay, do you see that? I can switch off my, and that shows me that the building is in the right place. Okay, now as a validator, I would move the road or change all the buildings. But at this stage, you need to check before you start drawing that that is the case. Now, most of those buildings over roads are probably because the road is offset and the buildings are in the correct place now. We will, as validators, we will check the instructions and fix that later. But that is a common mistake that you should try to avoid at all costs. If you are drawing buildings across roads, there is something wrong. Okay, please remember that. Now, crossing buildings, it shows you crossing highways, that goes across buildings crossing. That's also something that happens where buildings are crossing each other. That shouldn't be happening. You see that? And just press Q to square it up, Q to square it up, and that solves that problem. The other ones are crossing highways. Node connecting highway and building. Now, that's also something that's not very good to have. We should not have this sort of thing happening. You see that node is attached to the building. That node is attached to the building. That should not happen. So what we need to do is let's get our position back, select that, and select the node, select that, hold shift, select both nodes, right, and press G. Now that unglues the node, both nodes from the road, and you press Q to square up the building. Okay, that was how you would solve that. But please do not join your building to a road. That's another no-no that is not very good. Now, if you find that you run your validator and nothing comes up, even though you've got all this, check that you have everything unselected. Press the escape key first. Press the escape key first to unselect everything before you run your validator. And you will get all the errors of the square. Okay, are there any questions about drawing buildings, polygons, multi-polygons, or the validator?
Yes, there is a question, a few questions. One is from Jenny, who is asking, can you run custom topology rules?
Okay. Jenny, do you want to tell me your question?
Hello?
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, so I just wanted, so I'm guessing the validation step actually has a predefined rules when it's run?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, I was just wondering. Okay.
It searches for a whole lot of things, and you can, in actual fact, change it to filter through one or more, but that we will do on our advanced JOSM. I don't think you should worry about that at this stage.
Okay. Thank you.
Right.
Yeah, and the other one is from Businani, who is asking, during validation, do you consider the different imagery sources and possible the possible differences in accuracies?
Okay, yes, imagery is a complex subject. Your best thing to do is to check the instructions of the task of the project you're going to work on, because generally a good project manager will instruct you which imagery to look at. They may very well tell you that Bing is probably the sharpest imagery, but not the newest. So use Bing to set up everything and align everything, and then change to something like ESRI or Digital Globe to see the latest imagery and add any extra items or changes. So that would be done simply by going up to your imagery here at the top and selecting Bing was the basic imagery that was used, but Digital Globe Premium, Digital Globe Standard, and ESRI World Imagery are another 3 options that we have. Usually ESRI is about 2 to 3 years old, but it does not have high resolution, so it's not very clear to see. Digital Globe Premium is quite good and is an alternative if Bing has got clouds or you want to see a newer image. That is possible. To give you some idea, I have got Bing there open. I can use the right-hand click key to open up a window, and it says show tile info. And here it tells me down at the bottom the metadata capture date, that when the imagery was captured was 2012. Well, that's 6 years, more than 6 years old. So you can understand that while you're working from good imagery, it may not always be the latest. Let's have a look at Digital Globe Premium. And Digital Globe Premium, can you see the offset now? Okay, so I will correct that offset by going to my adjust imagery, and I want to adjust Digital Globe, right? I grab the imagery and I move that so that it's where it should be. I'm using this building as a guide, right? And I press OK. Now I can see that there's possibly a new building in here that is not on Bing, right? I can see that there's a difference here. And I can see that Bing was incorrectly drawn because that shows up clearly there. So you can see that there are differences. There is difference in size of the buildings in some cases. It depends on when the imagery was done and how recent it is as to what the differences will be. But by all means, check between imagery, understanding that the instructions are your first port of call as to which imagery you are going to use. Does that help you? Does that answer the question?
Yes, I think that answers the question. Thank you, Ralph. Yeah, no other questions on the chat, but in case anyone wants to pop a question, you're free to unmute yourself and go on and ask a question. Ralph, did you have any more things to cover?
No, I think that will be it from me now. Just remember, the quicker that you learn how to use your shortcut keys, the quicker it becomes for you to be able to switch your cursor and carry on mapping. So please remember the shortcut keys. I'm going to show you one other item that might be of use to you. Can you see my JOSM again?
Yes, we can see a JOSM.
All right, when you select your select tool, okay, the cursor changes, but at the same time, if you have a look down the bottom here, on this bottom row, it tells you what other shortcut keys can be used along with this cursor. So you can Shift Control to rotate, you can Alt Control to scale. Here we go. I'm going to do the Shift Control. My cursor changes and I can rotate the building. Okay. If I select the building and I use Control Alt, my cursor changes. I can make the building bigger or smaller simply by moving away or towards. Okay. So those are two items. That's in your select. If you go to your line tool, you will see that Control Toggle, Shift Control, this changes. And you don't have any extras with your line tool. Now, yes, there is something else I'd like to show you up here. Under Data, you can set your building shape to circle. Okay, Alt-Z. Okay, and in which case, all you need to do is to draw across the diameter of the building and click, and you automatically have a circle. So using Alt-Z, you can change your cursor to circle. If you use Alt-R, I'm going to use Alt-R, and the building tool comes up, and I'm back to drawing rectangle. I go to Alt-Z, and I'm back to drawing circles. That's how quickly you can alternate between. So JOSM helps you to really speed up the way you draw. Is that useful to anyone?
Yes, that's useful, Ralph. And there was someone who wanted to know, I think, how to add comments when uploading to OSM. So the question was, I would like to ask if you can be able to write change set comments when saving buildings or any spatial entities.
Okay, so if you want to comment when you are uploading, what you do is you want to upload to OpenStreetMap, you press the green upload button at the top, and that opens up all of these errors will now come up and say, hello, fix this please. But don't worry, you can continue to upload even without fixing. When you do that, your upload comes up. You'll automatically have a brief comment of the changes from your tasking manager, but you would put in something like added buildings as an extra, right? And you select which imagery you have been using. Okay, I was using Bing, so there it is. I can't make comments here, okay, as you can see. I'm going to cancel this because I don't want all of these changes to go on. But what happens is you go to the tasking manager, and the tasking manager allows you there's where you will put your comments, okay? So when you leave the JOSM editor and you go back to your tasking manager, you will put in your comments here that you added buildings and is now complete, okay? And when you add that to either you say mark as complete or stop validating or mark as stop mapping, that comment will come up in the tasking manager. Does that help you?
Thanks, Ralph. I think that answers the question. So, yeah, I think if there isn't any more questions on the chat, I think we can try to wrap up the webinar. So, yeah, thank you very much, Ralph, for your presentation. Michael, would you like to do the closing remarks? Maybe tell us like what's coming up in terms of the training webinars?
Well, yes, I just also sent a message out to the chat that the training working group has an email address. So if there are any further questions concerning this topic, which we couldn't answer, or if some other questions come up, one of the next days, just drop us a line and one of us will try to answer your questions. Yes, thanks for having joined us here, and let me apologize again that you had to wait some 10 or 15 minutes. Hopefully these issues won't occur again. I hope that you could all profit from the topics here, and if that really gets you more familiar with JOSM and you want to learn more, there will be another webinar on advanced JOSM topics. The date is not yet clear, but it will be in approximately 3 months, as we try to hold each of these webinars twice per year. And there we will be talking a little bit more about images and imagery alignment. And we'll also be talking about how to use filters. We've got some more editing topics, how to do more complicated buildings. We will talk about conflict resolution, which can occur when you upload data. And you will also learn more about relations. So stay tuned, wait for the announcement for the Advanced JOSM webinar. And yes, I hope you enjoyed this afternoon session.
Yes, thank you so much, Michael. I think that wraps it up. The video will be shared